It was the kind of Tuesday afternoon that feels like it was invented specifically for childhood. The sun low and golden the way it gets in late. August, when summer is beginning to loosen its grip, but refusing to fully let go, and the air still, carries that particular warmth that makes every hour feel longer than it actually is. Maya had been looking forward to the pool since the moment she woke up that morning, and anyone who knew her understood what that meant, because Maya did not express anticipation the way most 8-year-olds did, with squealing and bouncing and endless questions about when they were leaving. Maya communicated through her eyes and through the particular way. She held her body, and through a small repertoire of sounds that her mother Christine had spent years learning to read the way. Musician learns to read sheet music patiently and completely and with a reverence for every nuance. When Maya wanted something deeply, her whole face opened up like a window being unlatched, and on that Tuesday morning, Christine had seen that expression at breakfast when she mentioned the pool and had felt the particular quiet joy that comes from being able to give your child exactly what they need. Maya had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 14 months and severe autism at age 3, and the combination meant that her world was organized around sensory experiences in ways that most people never had to think about. Water was her place. Water was the one environment where her body felt cooperative rather than resistant, where the buoyancy released her from the constant negotiation with gravity that defined her days on land. In the water, Maya could move with something approaching freedom, and Christine watched her daughter become a completely different version of herself every single time they entered a pool, looser and quieter in the best possible. LA, like a fist finally unclenching. They had moved into the Sycamore Ridge community 14 months earlier, partly because of the pool, which was maintained by the HOA and open to residents from 10 in the morning until 8 at night. Every day between Memorial Day and Labor Day, the community was not what Christine would have chosen if she had been making decisions purely on aesthetics. The houses were a little too similar to each other, and the landscaping had the over-managed quality of a place where rules governed the height of your hedges, but the pool was clean, and the neighborhood was quiet, and the accessibility ramp that ran along Shallow End had been the deciding factor. She had done everything correctly from the beginning. She had introduced herself to the HOA board. She had attended the spring meeting where pool rules were reviewed. She had read the posted regulations 3 times and had confirmed that there was no rule requiring children to be supervised by an adult inside the water, only that minors under 10 had to be accompanied by a resident over 18 anywhere on pool grounds. Christine always accompanied Maya. She had never once left her daughter unattended at the pool. She had never once given anyone a reason to question her presence or her parenting or her right to be there. None of that turned out to matter on that particular Tuesday afternoon in August, and Christine would spend months afterward returning to that sentence in her mind. None of that turned out to matter, and feeling the specific bitterness of having done everything right and still arriving at a moment of complete helplessness. Her name was Deborah, and Christine had met her exactly twice before that afternoon. Once at the spring HOA meeting, where she had introduced herself as the chair of the community standards committee, and once at the mailbox cluster near the entrance to the development, where they had exchanged the kind of brief pleasantries that neighbors exchange when they are in the same place at the same time, without any particular desire to be in conversation. Deborah was somewhere in her late 60s, with the particular energy of a person who had decided at some point that the enforcement of small rules was a meaningful way to spend a life. Christine did not dislike her after those 2 interactions. She barely had enough information to form an opinion, but she had noticed something in the way Deborah spoke at the HOA meeting about pool regulations, specifically about the subsection addressing quote-unquote disruptive behavior that had made Christine pay a little extra attention. There had been a precision in her voice when she read that subsection that suggested personal investment, and Christine had filed it away. The way you file away small observations that don't mean anything yet. On the afternoon in question, Christine had arrived at the pool at approximately 3:15 with Maya in her wheelchair and the standard bag she always brought, which contained a change of clothes for both of them, and sunscreen, and Maya's communication board, and a waterproof watch, and 2 bottles of water, and a small bag of the specific cheese crackers that Maya would accept as a snack and nothing else. She had signed in at the gate using the keypad entry that all residents had been assigned codes for, and she had set up their chairs near the ramp, and she had helped Maya into her swim vest, and she had done everything in the careful sequential way she always did it, because Maya's comfort depended on the predictability of the routine, and because Christine had long since stopped thinking of these preparations as burdensome and had come to think of them simply as the texture of her particular life. Maya entered the water at approximately 3:30, and what happened in the following 90 minutes was the ordinary miracle that always happened. Maya moved through the shallow end with an ease and a joy that Christine could watch for hours without ever finding it less extraordinary. There were 2 other families at the pool when they arrived, a father with twin boys, who looked about 12, and a grandmother with a toddler, and everyone coexisted without incident, in the comfortable way that people who are genuinely focused on their own children tend to coexist. Deborah arrived at 4:45. Christine noticed her because the gate made a sound when it opened, and because Deborah was wearing the lanyard that held the master key to the pool gate in the equipment shed, and because she walked with the deliberate quality of someone who had come with a purpose rather than someone who had come to swim. She made a slow circuit of the pool deck, looking at each family in turn, and Christine met her eyes and nodded, and Deborah nodded back without warmth but without hostility either, or at least without hostility that Christine could identify in that moment. What happened next unfolded over approximately 4 minutes, and Christine has replayed those 4 minutes so many times since that she has worn them smooth in her memory, the way you wear a coin smooth by handling it too much. Deborah walked to the gate and opened it with her key and held it open in a way that made the other 2 families understand they were being dismissed, and they gathered their things without complaint. The father rounding up the twins, and the grandmother lifting the toddler, and then they left. And then Deborah let the gate close. And Christine looked up from where she was sitting on the pool steps with Maya in her arms in the shallow water, and she understood what was happening. Approximately 1 second before she could fully believe it. The sound of the latch engaging was not loud, but in Christine's memory it has the quality of something much larger. A door slamming, or a gavel coming down, or the particular finality of a sound that divides time into before and after. She was still processing it when Deborah spoke through the gate and said that pool hours for the day were ending early due to a scheduled maintenance inspection, and that all residents needed to exit immediately. Christine said that the posted hours showed the pool was open until 8 and that it was barely 5 o'clock. Deborah said that the HOA had authority under the community bylaws to close the pool for maintenance purposes at any time, and that Christine needed to gather her belongings and exit. Christine said that her daughter was in the water. She said this clearly, and she said it again because she needed Deborah to understand, not as an abstraction, but as a physical, concrete fact. Her child was in the water, and Maya could not simply be lifted out and redirected in a matter of seconds the way a typical child could. Because transitions were genuinely difficult for Maya, and because the process of bringing her out of the water required a specific sequence of steps that Christine had developed over years of trial and error, and that could not be compressed without causing Maya significant distress, and because Maya, in distress, did not mean crying and asking for an explanation the way most children express distress. Maya in distress meant a full sensory shutdown that could last hours and could include self-injurious behavior that Christine would spend the rest of the evening managing. She explained some of this to Deborah through the gate, not all of it because she was already measuring her words carefully, the way you learn to measure your words when you have spent years explaining your child's disability to people who did not ask to understand it and are making clear through their body language that they still do not wish to. She said, enough. She said her daughter had a disability and that removing her from the water required time and care, and that she would have her out within 10 minutes if Deborah could please wait. Deborah said that the pool was closed and that Christine was trespassing, and that if she did not exit immediately, Deborah would call the community security service. Christine said, please. She used that word. She has thought about using that word many times since, and she does not regret it exactly, but she has thought about it the way it felt to say please to a woman who was standing 10 feet away from a disabled child and choosing to hold a key in her hand and do nothing. Deborah did not open the gate. She repeated that Christine was trespassing and that maintenance personnel would be arriving shortly and that Christine needed to exit. Then she walked away. She walked across the pool deck and through a second gate that she locked behind her with the same master key, and she disappeared around the side of the equipment shed, and she did not come back. Christine stood in the shallow end of the pool, holding her daughter, and looked at the locked gate and then looked at the fence, which was 6 feet high in chain link, in which she could theoretically climb but could not climb, while holding Maya and could not leave Maya alone in the water to climb. And then she looked at her phone on the chair by the ramp just outside the water. She could reach the edge of the pool. She could reach over the fence if she stood on the second step of the ramp. She could not reach her phone. She stood there for a moment that felt much longer than it was, and then she did something she would describe later as the most surreal experience of her life. She began yelling for help in a quiet suburban neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon in August while holding her disabled daughter in a locked pool. Neighbor named Patrick, who lived in the house backing up to the pool fence, heard Christine yelling and came out of his back door and came to the fence and understood the situation quickly and retrieved Christine's phone by reaching through the chain link and passing it to her, and then waited with her talking to her through the fence while she called her husband, David, who arrived within 11 minutes and who had the presence of mind on his way out the door to call the non-emergency police line so that an officer arrived at approximately the same time he did. By the time David and the officer got the gate open, David had a key to the keypad, but not the manual override that Deborah had used to lock the gate from the outside, which required the master key and which took the officer several minutes to address through the property management company's emergency line. Maya had been in the water for 40 additional minutes past the point when Christine had begun trying to leave. She was not physically harmed. Christine wants to be precise about this because the story has a tendency in the retelling to become something it technically was not. Maya was in shallow water in a swim vest with her mother present at all times, and she was not in danger of drowning.
Ow!
But she was in distress. The disruption to her routine and the elevated anxiety in Christine's voice and body, which Maya read with extraordinary accuracy, despite being nonverbal, in the extended time in the water past the point when her body was ready to be done. All of it accumulated into exactly the kind of shutdown Christine had been trying to prevent. Maya did not sleep that night. David filed a formal complaint with the HOA the following morning, and Christine called an attorney that afternoon, and she also, and this is the part she had not originally planned to do, but which Patrick encouraged her to do, and which she ultimately decided was the right choice. She wrote about what happened on the neighborhood social media group. She wrote it factually. She did not call Deborah names. She did not speculate about Deborah's motivations. She described what happened in the order it happened, and she included the detail about asking please, and she included the detail about standing in the pool yelling for help while holding her daughter, and she posted it at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday, and by noon it had been shared beyond the neighborhood group, and by the following morning it had reached a local news reporter who called Christine's cell phone, and by the end of that week it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. Deborah released a statement through the HOA's property management company saying that she had been unaware that Christine was unable to exit without the master key, and that she deeply regretted any distress caused to Christine and her daughter. Christine read the statement twice and then set her phone face down on the kitchen counter and sat for a long time in the quiet of her house. The statement contained the word unaware. She thought about that word for a long time. She thought about the moment when she had said, "My daughter has a disability and this requires care, and I need 10 minutes," and Deborah had walked away. She thought about the word unaware and what it meant and what it didn't mean, and whether it was possible for a person to hear those words and walk away and then later describe themselves as unaware, and whether the distinction between not knowing and not caring was one that the law recognized or that she personally was capable of drawing. Without losing something important in herself, she decided it was not a distinction she was willing to make on Deborah's behalf. The attorney Christine retained specialized in disability rights and ADA compliance, and she told Christine within the first 15 minutes of their initial consultation that what Deborah had done likely violated the Fair Housing Act's provisions regarding disability discrimination in the use of common areas and possibly the Americans with Disabilities Act. Depending on how the pool facility was classified and that there were multiple avenues available for pursuing the matter formally, Christine listened carefully and took notes and asked the questions. She had prepared in advance, and at the end of the consultation, she asked the question she had been saving, which was whether winning, by which she meant whatever winning looked. Like in this context, whether financial or regulatory, or simply the formal acknowledgement that something wrong had been done, would change anything. The attorney was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that Christine has repeated many times since because it struck her as both honest and insufficient in equal measure. She said that winning would not change what happened, but that it might change what happened next, not for Christine necessarily, but for the next family with a disabled child who moved into a community with a pool and a woman with a key and the particular species of certainty that some people carry about. Their right to define normal. Christine filed the complaint. The HOA settled 4 months later without admitting wrongdoing. The phrase "without admitting wrongdoing" has since joined "without knowing" in Christine's private collection of words that mean something and nothing at the same time, and the settlement included a requirement that the HOA conduct ADA compliance training for all board members and committee chairs and revise their pool access policies to include explicit accommodation procedures for residents with disabilities. Deborah resigned from the Community Standards Committee 2 weeks after the story went national. Christine does not know whether she resigned voluntarily or was asked to step down, and she has made a deliberate choice not to investigate this because she has decided that Deborah's internal experience of accountability is not something she has the energy to track. What Christine tracks instead is Maya, specifically the way Maya re-entered the pool for the first time after that August afternoon, which happened on a Saturday in early September when the weather was still warm enough and David came with them and Patrick came with his daughter, who was 10 and had taken a shine too. Maya and Christine watched her daughter enter the water from the ramp and watched her face open up in that particular way and stood at the edge of the pool and felt something she could not name precisely, but which had components of relief and grief and defiance all wound together. She had written in the neighborhood post that she was sharing the story not to destroy anyone, but because silence had a cost and because families like hers paid that cost most often and most quietly, and because she had decided some time ago that quietness in the face of something wrong was not the same as grace, even when it felt like it. That sentence got quoted in 2 of the national articles, and several strangers sent her messages saying it had meant something to them, and she read every message and responded to none of them because she did not have the capacity in that period to hold other people's responses to her pain while also managing her own. She has more capacity now. Maya started working with a new occupational therapist in October, uses aquatic therapy as a primary modality, and who told Christine in their first meeting that Maya was one of the most water-responsive children she had worked with, and that the pool was clearly a significant therapeutic environment for her. And Christine said yes, and looked at her daughter in the water and said, "I know," and meant it in a way that contained the whole summer, the good Tuesday mornings and the terrible Tuesday afternoon and the nights without sleep and the attorney and the settlement and the word unaware and the word please and Patrick passing her phone through a chain-link fence in Maya's face when she finally got out of the water that day, and every moment since in which Christine had made the quiet daily decision to keep showing up to places that had not always made space for them and to keep bringing her daughter into the water, because Maya deserved the version of herself that water made possible, and because that was not something Christine was willing to let one woman with a key take away.